Yeah, I won't take too long. I'm going to discuss picture communication training for a little bit and then the research behind it. Can you guys hear me okay? Am I speaking loud enough for you guys? Okay. I'm going to move around a little bit. I don't like being behind the podium all the time. So let's get started. How many of you guys are familiar with picture exchange, or some people end up using only PECS or both? Any other people? Okay, about half of you guys. All right, well, even more than half. All right, so one of the first things is for those of you guys that don't really know much about PECS or have never even heard of it, what is this? What can you derive, what kind of meaning can you derive from the actual title, Picture Exchange Communication System? Someone who doesn't know much about PECS. Can you guess how it's done? Don't be shy. What's that?
There's pictures.
Okay, good. There's pictures, yeah. What do you do with the pictures? What do you think you would do?
Give it to another person?
Yeah, you exchange, right, in order to communicate. Okay, very good. So this is what I'm going to be talking about. But it was developed by Bondi and Frost in 1994. But really, it's, I guess I already had a bullet up there. About you take a symbol, right? I'm going to be talking about this phase one portion of it. You provide the symbol to the person that you're trying to train to communicate. And then what you want is obviously for them to pick up the symbol and exchange it for something that you would assume, and you've already done a preference assessment that they find reinforcing, right? That they actually want. Let's see. So we have 6 phases, okay? So the first one, which I just said, is communicating, using just one graphic symbol. Okay. The other one is expanding spontaneity. With this one, now instead of it just being right across from the person that you're trying to train, now with this one, it's what we call the distance and persistence phase, where now you're actually training the student not only just to pick it up from here, but also pick it up from a distance and then go and find you. Because what we find a lot of the times is that, the teacher isn't always next to that person, right? Or the interventionist isn't always next to, the person with the symbol. So you need to train the child or the student or your client to actually, obtain the picture book or the textbook, or later on we'll talk about using the speech generating device to do the same thing as you would with these pictures. But anyway, so that's a distance and persistence phase, or phase 2. With the third one, phase 3, well, we don't just communicate using one word at a time, right? You want them to expand their communication. So this is where you introduce the I want. So it's the I want plus the actual item. So in this case, I would have I want cookie, and to start developing a sentence using two icons. Okay, this one has I want, it's not I want, it's I have. So I want pizza, and then you would actually exchange it or give it to the person that you're trying to get pizza from. For phase let's see, I already went through phase 4. Phase 5, now you're trying to train the individual to start responding to what do you want, okay? So once you move on from what do you want, then later on you start trying to teach them to do more than just requesting, right? You want them to start spontaneously, not only asking for things, but, perhaps commenting on other things and not just requesting something that they want. So, oh,
I
gosh.
was just wondering, at which stage do you have them, have to discriminate between like 3 or 4 pictures?
Yeah, this is phase 3, where
Okay.
you do the picture discrimination.
So you do
So in phase 1 and phase 2, you start with 1. Obviously you would change it. You're not going to be teaching the same, like cookie or in this case marshmallow or fruit snack. You would have, wide variety, but then once they're able to, master that, they know, that if I give you this, I get something in return, and they're able to do it at different distances, then you move on to then introducing, 2 symbols, 3 symbols, 4 to where now, because if you recall with the first and second one, and that's a good question, because I don't think I actually really clarified it. You have the 1 symbol, but when you're starting off with the 1 symbol, it could be blank, right? And as long as they exchange it, you would give them, something that you're holding. So later on, you actually want them to discriminate of what is actually on the symbol itself. And later on, we'll be showing some, some videos demonstrating this. But we had a couple of participants in our studies who actually got stuck in the discrimination portion of it, where they really didn't grasp, they just were assuming that, okay, I hand up this card and I get something, but the issue is, well, sometimes, if you grab fruit snacks but you really want chips, there's a problem, right? So that's the phase 3 where you start, making sure that they can actually identify what's on that picture card. Okay, so with PECS, it's really easy in the sense that, as long as they can clearly identify what they want, and a lot of them do, right? They see something that they really want, and what do? Just grab it and take it. That alone, is showing you that they can identify something that they really want. So PECS really requires very few prerequisite skills, but one of the skills is certainly they can identify, what they want. So I've already talked about, requesting being the first thing that you work on with, phase 1 through phase 5. But really, there's a lot of research, and there's other researchers that say, well, I don't know, you should start, with the requesting. But there is a lot of research supporting that requesting is the more easy skill to start the student off with, because it's very reinforcing. You can deliver something that they want, right? It motivates them to actually communicate. So it's a good place to start with the requesting. So why select, exchange-based communication systems? Well, I've already said, it's one of the areas that it's easy to start training individuals, right? And then for the individuals with autism, a lot of the times, they have a hard time spontaneously communicating, right? Or functionally communicating, especially for those that are more on the severe end. I'm not talking about those that are more higher functioning. But it really is one of the deficits in that, they tend to become sometimes passive communicators. So, it would be a good place to start with teaching them spontaneous requesting. So one of the other things is when you start, introducing icons, picture symbols, it's always a good idea to make sure that they're highly iconic, right? Because it'll be easier for them to start understanding, or discriminating between symbols. You don't want to start them off with something that, isn't very iconic. Now, one of the other benefits of, using symbols is that, especially with PECS, if you're exchanging something, if I just, hand you something and you have no idea about, what PECS is and what you're supposed to do, what would you assume that if I hand you this picture card with marshmallows, what am I trying to communicate with you?
Want marshmallows?
I want marshmallows, right? It doesn't require much from the other person other than, okay, they see something, they can pretty much assume that you're wanting to get marshmallows or say something about marshmallows, but they don't need to be trained in order to understand what the other person is trying to communicate to them. So what is the evidence behind, PECS? There's more and more research coming out each year. Initially, there was a lot of anecdotal evidence. Now, there's a lot of research that, and especially because PECS is designed really, to target requesting skills, because most of those phases are, training and requesting, is that, they found that the research really supports that, yes, PECS is, effective in increasing communication skills. And there's actually been, several systematic review and meta-analyses that have, looked at all the research and said, okay, all the research, is really supporting saying that, it is an appropriate, intervention to increase requesting skills. The evidence is very promising, but there's some studies that report not only, the effects on requesting, but also on some other measures. Sometimes they report, speech. Sometimes they report, I did a study where I also took data on, they'd increase eye contact, increase, some of the smiling, stuff like that, sometimes some people have said it has helped with, okay? So, but the evidence really shows that it's good for requesting. There's really not a lot of evidence showing that it's appropriate, or that, not that it's not appropriate, but that it doesn't really increase spoken language. But it's not surprising because PECS is really designed to increase what? Is it designed to increase speech? No, right? The people that are, using it don't have really a lot of the spoken language, right? That's the reason why they need, another modality. So, it's not surprising that it's really good for requesting, and, the research is less than certain in other areas. With the review, or it was a meta-analysis that Ganson, and her colleagues ended up doing a couple years ago, and the evidence that they reviewed showed that actually, the younger children had better results. But this could also mean that, well, there's a lot more research where the participants are younger rather than they're older, right? But, the effects were really, stronger for those that were preschool children. And then the other thing, for the last bullet point, best outcomes for participants who mastered most PECS phases. Well, this is not really surprising because if you have a participant, in a study who ends up going from phase 1 all the way to phase 6, starting from phase 4, 5, and 6, it becomes a little bit more complicated, right? Because now they're not just exchanging something and getting something in return. Now they're really having to discriminate. And then in phase 6, they're actually, making comments. So it's not surprising that somebody who's able to master all 6 phases, there are better outcomes, because if you have a child who could only perhaps master phase 1, which is a very simple exchange, and can't move beyond that because they have problems perhaps with discrimination skills, well then, they're probably more on the lower functioning end, right? So it's not surprising that those that do have those skills can master all of them. Okay, so let's see. These other meta-analyses were very similar in their findings, again showing that, for all the participants in the studies, pretty much all of them were able to learn requesting through PECS, and again with the study I had conducted a few years back, same results. It was effective for requesting skills, but the findings weren't really all that impressive in terms of increasing spoken language or eye contact. Okay, let's see. I think this is one of my last slides. We're running very short on time. Okay, so again, I'm just reiterating what I just mentioned earlier. The support is there for, PECS as an intervention for requesting skills primarily. Okay, and then the other thing is that there's, evidence showing that PECS is more effective, pretty much more effective than using manual signs to increase requesting skills. All right, I'll skip the, the first two since I already talked about that. But the other thing is that for those that ended up collecting data on the impacts of PECS on challenging behavior, really, there's only been a very few studies. And the findings have been, different for some studies. They've reported that yes, it did help, with decreasing problem behaviors, and others, those weren't defining. But if you're increasing functional communication skills, and a lot of the times, right, the problem behaviors are because, there's a lack of those functional communication skills, especially for those that are, lower functioning who don't have very good communication skills, then it wouldn't be surprising that the more communication they have, that these problem behaviors would decrease, right? And I'll talk more about problem behaviors here in the next probably hour or so. But there's been some issues in terms of some of the research that has been conducted on PECS. And one of the things is that there's not a lot of studies that actually report what is the long-term, effects of PECS on, requesting skills and other, other skills as well. The maintenance is not something that, is reported in all the studies. And then the generalization of, these learned skills to other environments or other, trainers or in other areas. So that's something that's really important and necessary if you're going to be, conducting research on this, is ensuring that you're collecting that type of information, because there's a gap in the research for that. And then one of the other things is that, when you're doing a research study, it's really important that you clearly describe, who the participants are, because in order for us to then make a determination of whether PECS is, good for one population, well, you need to really describe who that population is, right? Because, what works for one individual may not work for the other, so the more you know who that population was that ended up being the subjects of these research studies, the better it is that you're able to really take those, those results and apply them into your classroom settings or, the other settings that you work in. And then the other thing is there is a lack of treatment integrity being reported in some of these studies. And treatment integrity is important because it shows if you have a high percentage of treatment integrity, it means that the intervention was truly carried out the way it should be carried out. I know that in classrooms that I've been in, we have teachers that say, "Oh, we use PECS all the time," but when you start really looking into it, they're really not using PECS. Using symbols alone does not equate to using PECS, right? Using PECS is actually a training system, and that's the reason why there's different phases, and there's a very specific way of doing things, and the training protocol is very specific. So if you're not doing it the way it was intended to be done, then you're not doing PECS, you're doing something else. So it's really important that, this type of information gets reported. That way as the consumer research that, okay, you know, when they're talking about, you know, PECS, it truly was conducted the way it was meant to be done. Okay? All right, so any questions about PECS? I apologize that I went really fast, but I know that, you know, we were running a little bit behind. Yeah? Okay. Robbie, do you talk about more graphics or speech generating devices?